My name's Ian Domigan. I'm a lecturer at Lincoln University. My background is a mechanical engineer, and one of my main interests was actually in the innovative process in developing new products, mainly for the agricultural industry. One of the things that we realised pretty early on was that the students were probably one of our biggest resources, in that if we have a problem we can stick 20 or 30 minds on it. And the only real issue then was to actually work out how we would actually get this problem-solving session with such large numbers. So what we did is we teach the students an innovative process, and it's actually interesting because if you think of people like Edison, he had something like 10,000 patents. So, someone's actually, there is a method to actually solve problems. And so what we did is we looked around and we developed a method here that we use that is appropriate for students to use. And what that really comes down to, in my opinion, is the understanding of the problem. And that 98% of finding a solution is to actually understand the problem properly. And from then on, it's really a relatively mechanical process, the innovation process. And you have to realise that it's a stepwise process, that you're not going to have a quantum leap, you're not going to have a quantum change in something happening. It's just going to be a small incremental change, and that's fine. And some students say, oh yes, but we're just slightly improving on something, or we're just doing something a bit better and making it a little bit easier. But that's the whole innovative process. It's not like you're going to mostly 98% of the time it's going to be in that form. So you're not going to find that you're just going to be making a quantum leap like some nuclear power plant or some new energy source or something like that. It's going to be a slow, hard grind. And when it comes to hard grind, there's sort of 2% inspiration, 98% perspiration. I mean, that's the sort of things you hear people say. And that's the truth, that the old wow factor of, the eureka type moment is actually the fun part of it. And then to actually get a product to a prototype phase is probably 5%, and then you've got the 95% part. And that's where the hard grind starts. And for us, what we've been doing is that we're very fortunate that our students actually understand the problem, because most of them are land-based and come off a farming situation. So they can easily identify what the problem was, because most of the time they've been given the terrible job to do themselves. So what that means is that they've got a very good understanding of the problem. They bring it, that's 90-odd%, 98% of the issue, and then we just give them the skills to actually solve that problem. For us, what we've used in the past, we've used the National Field Days at Mystery Creek as a sort of the show point or area where we're going to try and pull everything together. For us, what we've been doing is we enter them in the competition. In 2009, they won the Golden Standard Award, which is the highest award, and that was for a machine that just clicks on the back of a motorbike and moves irrigation equipment. That was very pleasing because they beat out $1 million pieces of equipment like automatic milkers and that sort of thing. So that was a real highlight. And then last year in 2010 we won the Young Inventor of the Year award. So what we're sort of building up here is that we're building up a pretty good history of innovation. And the thing about it is that it comes back to what I said in the beginning, was that it's actually a process. You have to have a good understanding for the idea, and then you just work your way through it.
Is there a difference between the innovation process and the scientific process?
Absolutely. The scientific process probably, in my opinion, doesn't lead to any result at all. The scientific process is virtually to look at a problem, a bit of navel gazing, a bit of literature review, and then you go out and you stand on top of a hill and you gaze and see what's over on the next hill, and then you work out how you can get there. It's not actually probably trying to solve real world problems. It is required, but one of the things that you don't do, or in my opinion you shouldn't do, is to go out and see what's there already. because that actually taints the idea process, because you become limited by what's out there. So what we're really trying to do is to open it up, to go in quite cold for a start, to come up with some ideas, and then later you can do that sort of research and literature review to make sure that the systems are fine. There are obviously differences between students and how you approach it, because there's no real one methodology that will probably suit everyone, and the innovative process has to accommodate that. So what we will have, and what's interesting is that students, when you first arrive, you say, oh, you know, what's the real problem? You know, how can we solve this? Or what don't you like doing? And they'll come up with, you know, a couple of ideas, and then there'll be the ones that'll be quite quiet, and they say, well, I don't actually know of anything. And it's really interesting, because once everyone starts to hunker down and work together, you find that those quiet students actually come right to the top again. And it's really interesting that also when people are explaining their ideas, and that's so important, it's all about communication, that there is sort of, if someone explains something to you, you think, oh, I think you thought that. And you say, no, I was actually meaning this. So it's actually a really fun process when it actually gets going. People are generally a bit slow to start with, and that's fair, but once they realise that it's a pretty open process, and one of the things that I do is a bit of psychology, I suppose, and that's you've got to be in a relaxed state to think inventively. And by that I mean you can't be stressed, you've got to be completely relaxed. That's why you have the type moments when you're walking along the beach or in the shower. That's why you solve real problems when you actually are completely calm. And what I do, which the students don't really appreciate too much, is I take them out to the local field here and I stick them 100 metres away from each other, and I tell them to lie there and just look up at the sky. And they think, oh, this guy's lost the plot. But what you're doing is you're actually just creating an absolute serenity for people. And when you're actually at peace, you can actually start to think. And I think that we overlook that part of the process, that it's actually a mind process, that you've actually got to be in the right frame of mind to actually be creative. And there are many, many ways of solving that or getting to that level. But one of the things that I do is I move people from a classroom situation to sitting under a tree or something like that. It sounds a little bit fruitcakey when you first think of it, but if you actually understand that you've actually got to be relaxed, you don't need to be confined by being in a class with a board behind you, that you can actually just think openly, and also to have a very open process. So people, even if what I find is that when people laugh at someone's idea, it's actually a very good idea. So for me, it's a real gem when someone sort of says, oh, that's a nutty idea, and you think, hang on, that's not so stupid at all, and then you take it from there. The innovation process, as far as I'm concerned, is completely stepwise, and that's probably due to the fact I'm an engineer, that I tend to think in a very A leads to B, leads to C, leads to E, and that's an educational type thing of a way of thinking. So for me, the first thing to do is problem identification. So you've got to identify the problem and understand what the problem is. And that will take different forms. They call it action research, which is basically a name for talking to people and allowing them in, which if you allow them in, you do cooperative inquiry, so that you allow people to become part of the design process, or else you exclude them from it and you just get their ideas or what they think the problem is, and then you say, oh, thanks very much, see you later. And then you think about the idea. Now that's in my opinion, that's got to happen at some time, because someone's got to make the key decision. Otherwise you get the so-called committee designed product, which is just a nonsense. So someone's got to take the lead and in the design. And then what you need to do, in my opinion, is you need a very good concept filter. So when you come up with an idea, you've actually got to have a very good filtering system, and it's got to be a very harsh filter, so that if you have too slack a filter, what happens is that every idea you have obviously passes through to the other side, so you've actually achieved nothing. So what I do is I actually have a very hard filter, and that pushes the design to simplicity. And it's very frustrating trying to have a concept to get it past your filter to the other side. And if it's not happening, then you've got to, again, as I said with the process, you've actually got to be in the right mindset. So you've got to be quite relaxed. It's probably a good reason to take a week's holiday from the university and have a bit of a break for a while to think about something. And so you've actually got to lower the standard of your filter slightly, and then an idea will be able to drift through. But then it's no good just having one idea, because you actually need to compare that idea against other ideas. Maybe it's something that's out there. There are many techniques, there are matrix systems to be able to compare one idea against another based on a numerical value. I myself prefer a better, worse, equal, because it's a very simple thing to do. Like, is this product easier to pick up with the hand? Yes or no, or it's the same. So it's either a plus is better, 0 is the same as my datum one, which exists already, or negative is worse. And then what I tend to do is I tend to add up all the pluses and all the minuses, and whichever one has the highest level of pluses or minuses is the product that I go with. So I think that there's no point in just producing one concept. You've got to have multiple concepts to actually drive, to make sure you're actually driving the right concept through. So once you come through that phase, then you need to bring your design out and you need to split it up the top again of the whole process. And you actually have to do a reductionist system on it. So you have to look at each of the items and say, is this really necessary? Do we actually need it? What is its function? And they call it an object function diagram. And you look at how each object relates to another object in the design. And from that, you can determine if you've got an outlier, i.e. you end up with A leads to B, B leads to C, C leads to nowhere. So C, is it really needed? Probably not in your design. So you can look at ways of eliminating that. An example of that would be that I was doing a project on a rat trap. And you'd think that a rat trap is the most simple thing that you could ever get to. And what it was that the rats steal. That's their natural nature, to go and steal. So when you look at it, you have a trigger system that you put a bait on, of which the rat can actually take the bait off. And that's the problem. But if you integrate those two things together and actually have the bait be the trigger, so the trigger arm is being held down, so when the animal pulls the bait off, they set the trap off. And that there we achieved by the object function method, because it showed that we didn't need a treadle to put the bait on and the bait, that the bait could do both those processes, because the bait was the outlier, because one led to the other. But if you back feed it, you can say, hey, why can't we combine these two together? And it's worth spending a long time in that process, because that's going to make your design be a winner or not. You've then got to, once you've done that, you've then got to have a sexy design. It's got to look sexy. And that's really another person's job if you can't do it yourself. We use computer modelling programs to do that, to try and see if we've actually got something that actually looks really nice. So it's got to really look the part, and it doesn't matter whether it's a foot trough or if it's a new Mercedes. They've got to look sexy. So people, it's got to be pleasing to the eye. The lines have got to be nice. There can't be pieces sticking out of it, and that's a really interesting part of the design. And then you come down to how we're going to manufacture it. So there's design for simplifying, there's design for making it look nice, then there's design for manufacture. And quite often those ones will have to come back up. When you get down to those, it's ideal to have the marketing people and those sort of people involved in the early stages of the design. In some respects, because you get buy-in by them. And that's the important part, that if you can actually get someone, when I talk about that cooperative inquiry part in the beginning, was to actually get the marketing people and possibly a manufacturing person to get them already seeded into the design, so that they can actually see, oh yes, this is progressing well, and they actually become part of it. So if you can, so it's not sucking in, but if you can absorb the people in that you want in the early stages, it will make the whole process a heck of a lot easier. One one of the things that is always interesting in a design is you hit a block. And by a block I mean you've got a really good concept, but there's one little part that's tripping you up. And an example of that would be when we were, say, doing a K-line mover, which was to move irrigation equipment, was that we couldn't actually catch the actual K-line because it's lying on the ground. So it's a pipe that's on the ground. And then a student had a great idea, well, why don't we just simply put a little riser up? And then we could actually drive a motorbike along and we could collect that riser. And why don't we make it a ball so we can come from any direction? So it's those sort of things that you can have a really good idea, and you've got to understand that it's going to be frustrating, because to be complicated is easy. You can just throw computers at it and you throw technology at it and you'll solve a problem. But there's always the KISS, keep it simple, stupid type scenario, and that's what I insist on, that we've actually got to drive for simplicity. And there are methods for that. There's a block process, and what you do is you look at how every component in the design relates to another component. And the one thing that I've learned in design is that you're better off spending a lot of money on one part rather than little amount of money on many parts, because when you come to a production level, which you've got to consider in the design process but not be restricted by, is that you quite often, it's worthwhile investing quite a lot of money in one component as opposed to other components. For me, I've been involved in the design of animal traps, and they're very difficult because people don't want to pay for pest destruction. And the problem with them is that you have a product that's going to sell for $40, so you reduce that down to quarter manufacturing, quarter overheads, quarter profit, and then that sort of thing. So you're dealing on those simple numbers. So if it's $40, that gives you a manufactured product of $10, which means that you have to use really smart design to be able to do that. And you have to reduce the number of components down. I'm not saying that you can't invest a lot in a component, but you have to reduce it. The other thing that you have to look at is that you can't afford to actually have manufactured dies. So a lot of the machinery and the way the things are manufactured will also affect your design in the end. But that's a process that comes later on. It's a sort of a refining process. And in some ways I think that's probably someone else's job, because there are a lot of jobs in getting a product to the marketplace. There's the design, the inspiration design, there's the product design for manufacture, there's the marketing, and that's a huge cost. And I mean, you're looking at a third of the bill of a product just being marketing, and then you've got to try and displace something off the shelf. So you've got to convince someone that they should take product A, which you've just incrementally improved, off the shelf and put your product in place. And then the problem is that you're going to have reliability of supply, you're a small-time person starting up, whereas the other people, what I've had problems with myself, is that they might have a suite of products. So business is not very kind out there. So if someone comes up with an idea and they say, I'd like to put this one on, displace that one, then the person that's manufacturing a lot of products that that person is buying says, hey, listen, if you take that product, we're going to pull the lot. So they use that power. So you've got to realise that then, unfortunately, you can be friendly in business, but it's still business, and you've got to understand that the objective of it is to make money at the end of the day. I sort of got involved in innovation in the design process because I designed an animal trap to start with. I thought it was very clever actually, but it ended up that the animals used to sleep in it, which wasn't really what we wanted. So I was trying to kill them, and they ended up sleeping in the thing. And I thought, oh, this is a bit difficult. And so I looked around for an innovative process on how to design an animal trap, and there's no process. There's no actual innovative process at all. In fact, I think it was back in about the 50s and 60s that the innovative process was actually recognised. It first had its roots in economics in about 1934 with Sukumta, and he basically said, look, there are two types of things: there's process innovation and product innovation. So the word innovation was around for a long time. And then we progressed on to about the 60s, and they say that the best thing that ever, best innovation that ever came out was the method of innovation. So there has been an identification of a method of innovation. And for me, what I came to is I came to designing animal traps, and it was very hard to actually ask an animal what you think of something, because they might not like the colour, they might not like the size of it, and it became really complex. And what it was that you had to bring in ecology in with the engineering. So you had to deal with the animal first and then the engineering secondary. And what that is, that could be, you've got to, when you look at animal traps, there's something like 10,000 patents out there. And you've got to ask yourself, well, why are there so many and yet so successful products? There are a few successful products, because if they were so successful we wouldn't have pests anymore. So I think that the problem is that people design the engine. They design the idea without looking at the entire body. And this can also be compared, I suppose, to people that do up old automobiles and that sort of thing. The people that restore these cars will quite often just repair the engine, and they never get to actually do the body work, which is the hard work. So the innovation process, you've actually got to put the whole thing together and make it a whole package. How we got into the teaching of innovation here at Lincoln was that we knew that our students were very practical, and we just had to equip them with the right sort of skills to be able to skill set to allow them to take it on, to be able to actually produce a product. We also know that our farming community is very innovative, the Kiwi number 8 wire type technology. And what we hope to tap into in the future is to have a centre of which people can come with their ideas, and then we can either get the students to work on those ideas, or we will ourselves work on those ideas with the farmer. So it's really Kiwis solving problems for Kiwis. And I think the thing about it is that a lot of what we're doing is what I call public good. I think that people that believe that they're going to make $1 million out of a patent are quite deluded. The only thing that will happen is that the lawyers become rich. They'll take 8,000 off you or 10,000 off you for the beauty of it. They'll then tell you to go international, and they'll take another 20,000. IP protection is important, but really what you want to be doing is to be doing that with a manufacturing person and say, look, here's a good idea that I've got, and go from there. So our idea is to use the students and then to use the farming community to do it. We quite often get farmers coming to us, or people out in the agricultural field coming to us with an idea, and it often is the case that you've just got to say, look, I just don't think you've got anything there. I don't think you've got anything that's patentable. I think you've got something that's quite a good idea, but the best thing you can do is just show people how to do it. And what we've always tried to do is to do it at Mystery Creek Field Days up in Hamilton, the National Field Days, and that's where we've showcased all our ideas. So the idea is that the students will develop a simple product up, a prototype, and then they will actually have to explain it to the people at the field days, which is a fantastic thing, because they get to interrelate with people. People say, oh yes, but if you'd done this and this and this, that could have been a better idea. So it's a complete building process. If you sit in seclusion with your idea, I don't think your idea will ever come out. So you've actually, at some time, you've actually got to get out there and do it. I think for most ideas, people have a lot of ideas, but they actually are unwilling to give, because I think, again, it's going to be a financial gain. I think that really, when it comes down to it, most of the ideas are not that structured. For example, we had a person come with a new growing technique, and it meant that you could grow strawberries very easily, and you could harvest them very easily. And it was a clever technique, there's no question about that, but it was something that you or I could look at and then just go and replicate in our backyard. So it's something you can't sell. So there are those ideas that have got sales capability, and those ideas which are just good ideas. One of the things that did get commercialised was a gate system, a variable race gate. And what that meant, it was a very, very clever idea. What it was that in a farming situation, you quite often want to be performing a function on animals, and sometimes you'll have small lambs and other times you have big woolly sheep. So of course they take up different space. So this student developed a system that a gate or a race system could be changed on the run, so that instead of having a wide race system, you could narrow it down for a narrow one for lambs, which stopped them running between your legs and all that sort of thing. And that was picked up by Prattleys. Again, it was a public good thing. It was commercialised. The idea was taken into commercial setting, but really there's no return to the student themselves. But so some ideas will just be, as I said, public good. Other ideas that can be commercialised, the problem that we've had is that we take the student so far. So we're doing the 5% part, I'd say, which is getting the idea, showing them the idea, getting the idea up and running. And then it's the hard graft after that. So then it's the 98%. It's really getting in there and actually getting that idea out there, commercialised, getting some other partner involved in it that's willing and believes in what you're doing and prepared to put their name on the product. And that's a hard call, and you need a lot of skills to do that. And you need marketing skills, you need manufacturing skills, and these are skill sets that a student may or may not have. And that becomes a really difficult part of the process. Some ideas that we do have, of course, do lead through to commercialisation and patents. In my own case, I developed an animal trap for killing possums. It has 45% of the New Zealand market at the moment, of which they pay a royalty of around about 5%, which is a stock standard royalty, 2.5% to 5%, depending on how good you are at negotiating at the time. And it's got PCT, which means that's protected in Canada and the US, and it's sold in those countries. Really, if I was actually going to try and make some money out of a product, I think that humans are the best ones, and old age, to be quite honest. I think that people come at the end of their life, they've got a fair poultice of money, and they're looking for new things. So if I was actually looking to make money, I suppose, out of an idea, I'd be looking for the old age market and seeing if I could do something there. It might be some fancy foot warmer or a thing that the people can put their shoes on, or a different style of doing your shoelaces up. That's the area I would look at if you want to make some dollars.